So we are live, Launch Radio, episode number 15, brother and sister, back for more fun. We have a special guest today on Launch Radio, and his name is Zach Schleien. I believe you pronounced it. I'm going to have to ask him about that. He's going to be calling in any moment. Is this camera two?
This is camera two.
This is camera two. Oh, amazing.
Camera one.
Camera one. We've got them everywhere. We have a 3-camera setup now as we keep it all going. So Zach's going to be calling in any second. We're going to talk to him. He has a dating app he invented, and we really want to talk about that with him. He's also in the mental health world, so it's going to be fascinating to talk about that. And I'm sure he'll have a lot to say. So we will be interviewing him momentarily.
Now, this is episode 15. Just a reminder, we're on 7 different platforms. So you can find us if you're driving in the car and you need a new podcast to listen to. It's not just on YouTube. We're on Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, all of them.
Google Podcasts.
Yes.
I mean, we're on everything.
Yes. Check us out, Launch Radio.
Launch Radio.
Episode 15.
Episode 15.
So how did you get to know Zach from,
so
in terms of like how you knew about his business? And
they reached out to me, actually, his I think her name's his agent or his representative reached out to me to interview him actually for Thrive Global, who I've written blogs for. And I asked Thrive Global and they approved, and we're going to put that in their community section. I'm going to probably use pieces from this for that. But I really want to talk to him. So there will be a blog format of this as well up on Thrive Global in the oncoming weeks. So I just met him because they reached out to me, and it was really interesting. I looked through his website and through this app, which he's going to tell you about. I don't want to speak too much about it, but it's video. It's a video format, the app, and there's like 60 seconds within this app. It's a dating app, and you actually talk to each other on video. But he's got a whole strategy behind it that he's gonna talk to us about.
So kind of like Marco Polo, right? Similar?
Kind of like Marco Polo, but for dating. I would describe it in that way. It looks like he's calling in now.
Hey.
Hi, Zach. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Good.
Zach, what's happening? How are you?
I'm good, man.
Good.
So let me know from like, is there a certain perspective you want me or angle?
Yeah, so we're live right now. So we're actually just going to go through just kind of how you developed this platform. You know, what made you go into it? I know you're in the mental health field. What kind of got you driven into this? And then kind of a little bit talk about the platform itself.
Yeah, could you give a little background, like just in terms of like what you want me to speak about, like in terms of
Yeah. Well, we heard about the app through Michelle, and it really interested me because I'm always, and Kira, we're always interested in tech stuff that's happening and new apps and things people are inventing. And I especially find on the podcast here we've actually talked about dating and how it applies within the tech world and just what's happening with AI. And where things are going with that, and what's next, and where does the future bring? And so, Michelle sent that to me, and then I looked up your site, and you have a blog where you also write about a variety of topics. It looked like. I think one of the topics on the blog was talking about like different fetish and sexuality stuff, which I found interesting because we've had people on that are involved with that in the past. We had Jen Friel on weeks ago. So just seeing that you have a variety of different topics you write about, and you also talk about mental health. I think, is it 18? What's it?
18%. Yeah.
So I want to hear about 18%, as well as filter off, and just hear about how you came, what got you involved in these different things that you're involved in, and what kind of led, like we want to focus on the dating app, but I want to hear kind of about the other things too, and just how the dating app came out of all of that you're doing.
It actually, my interest in like the dating app industry, that started with that blog that I actually ended up selling, topromp.com.
Yes.
So at the time, that was a few years back where I was reviewing dating apps and hacks for like millennials. So this was like the beginning of Tinder's getting super popular, and then Bumble came out and their spin was around like empowering the woman. But the challenge that I always saw in the industry was the amount of time that you had to take. And then also, aside from the amount of time of just like, it didn't always facilitate like authentic connections. You may match with a lot of people, whether it's any of these really popular apps, but then matching is just the start. And then it comes down to going back and forth. Oftentimes the conversation dies very quickly, and then you have to then actually meet them, which requires a lot of time. And then oftentimes when you actually meet them, there's no chemistry whatsoever. So this like funnel, and that's how I look at it, is like a very long and sometimes tedious funnel. Obviously, at times it could lead to a relationship or even a marriage, but it was just, I saw it as a really inefficient way of dating. And that's what inspired me to create Filter Off, which is a video first app, which facilitates authentic connections through live video.
Oh, interesting.
That's so fascinating. And you hear about, at least I've heard as far as social media goes, about how much live video is becoming the thing, not just in dating, but in everything. You know, live video is the direction things are going, from what I understand.
Yeah.
And so you've got so you decided to do it based off that. And then tell the viewers and people watching and listening, how does the format work? Because obviously the other traditional ones, they're swiping. And then I believe with Filter Off, you actually, there's like 60 seconds, right? And you record a 60-second video. What is like the process funnel of how people match, and how does that work?
Yeah, so it's actually a live date. So basically right now, every Sunday at 7 p.m., you're entered into 3 matches. And a match is actually your live date. So before you get onto the date, you can see some fun facts about them. So it's basically a blind date based off of a few preferences, location, age, and gender interest. And then you go into a live, almost like a FaceTime style chat for 60 seconds.
So basically it takes it's the first step that would have been like, let's go for coffee. Instead, it's like, let's just see if this actually works.
For sure.
From like the comforts of our own home, and then maybe we'll meet in person.
Yeah, 100%. And that was the goal, is just shorten that funnel, quote unquote, and see if you really vibe. And the thing is, if you don't, that's no big deal. You just saved each other a lot of time. And if you do vibe, then you can take it offline, and we encourage that to actually find your match. So that's kind of what we're trying to facilitate.
Interesting.
Now, do you think that video, because I obviously like what video does, and I think things are going that way, but like social media, do you think that this takes away from, and I'm sure people have asked you this, but do you think it takes away from real in-person connection? Do you think that people get what they need by doing a video, or do you think there's like a magic to meeting someone in person first? Like, do you think video establishes all you need to, or are people missing something by not meeting in person?
I think it's a good question. Oftentimes before, when I've used other dating apps, I've asked, hey, do you mind if we like jump on a video chat? And sometimes they'd get a little like, hey, I'll do a phone call.
Right.
But I think phone call is much more powerful than text to see if you actually do connect, but not nearly as powerful as video or actually meeting in person. Because again, you're basically judging it on what they sound like, but when you're actually seeing them face to face, and that's the like beautiful thing about video, I think it's really, really close to the real thing, is actually like being in person. Obviously not the same, because you can't like go through experiences with someone like going to a museum or anything of that nature. But just for like a one-on-one session, I think video is really an ideal way of communication.
Is there another app that's similar to this? Like, do you have? Is there? I was looking up other competitors that are trying
So
to better
the league is doing video as well.
Are they?
Yeah, they're beta testing it.
I know the league. I didn't know that.
Yeah, we're actually working on a few things that are going to be pretty different in the next few months versus just the 7 p.m. call. So I'm pretty excited. I don't want to share it at the moment, but pretty excited. As I think the most important thing is how do we imitate like human behavior, right? Like actually going on a date but cutting down that time, because right now we're New York City focused with the goal of then expanding to the West Coast, but especially these urban centers where like no one has enough time. They're always complaining about time. They're like they're too busy at work. So like how do we just make their lives easier? So a new process that we'll be implementing, I think will just save a lot more time and create more of like a true human experience, like what that process looks like.
It'll get to the point where you hear these things about people creating like digital avatars of themselves online. We'll have like our avatars go on a date and then come back and report to us. So she's not right for you, Jeff. Like,
that's just horrifying. I hope that doesn't.
I mean, that's where this video stuff is
getting pretty sci-fi, and then soon.
But it's not out of the realm, unfortunately. Like fortunately or unfortunately, where it's like, what persona do I want to put out into the dating world today? You know, like you're Jeff 2.0 today, and then tomorrow you're Michael, whoever.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've actually heard people say too that like most people online, their online version is a different person than they are when they meet in person. Like it's a different version of you. And social media, which I'm all for, I think we're all about tech here, but one criticism is like, it's like people get addicted to social media. It's like it's almost like drunk on social media. Like when you're drunk, you become a different person. It's like social media, is it doing the same thing?
Yeah.
Because of an addiction. And I don't know. I think all of that is really interesting. And I think that what you're doing is interesting because it's matching, but it's bringing video in, and then artificial intelligence involvement in it, I think, is also really interesting. And how the swiping, like we're now meeting people through swipes. The AI is really setting that up. If you think about it, right? By people swiping. So AI is helping people now find matches. And that's really interesting to me. So I'll be curious what you do, how you keep progressing with it, and what's next for it as you progress along with it.
So I think you hit on a couple of really good points, especially with swiping that basically promotes like addictive behavior, like a dopamine rush. And again, we're trying to get away from that and create more like human connection.
Yeah.
So like we believe video is the future for dating apps. I think you're already seeing it. Other apps have added video to their actual chat. Bumble just added it. Once you've already swiped right on the individual. But I think a lot of it is also the process of actually meeting. So like in traditional dating apps, it's typically swiping. For us right now, we're doing the 7 p.m., but we have other ideas of how to create those connections. It may not just be at 7 p.m. So I think the focus of video will always be there for Filter Off, but the process of getting to that point may change to facilitate a non-addictive behavior and just more of a true like human experience. And I think that's super important for Filter Off.
Well, it'll be super helpful out here because I know, like, I live on the east side, and there's no way in hell I would date someone on the west side, and vice versa. You know what I mean? Here, the joke is like you don't date outside your zip code because it takes so long to go 8 miles would take you an hour and a half here. So it's like, no, sorry, we can't date. You're in a different like area code or zip code. Like I can't.
And totally. And I like too that you are focused on the human experience of it all, because I think that's an important thing that you're emphasizing, and people forget that easily with all this tech, so I think that's pretty cool.
Now, did you find that, you're originally from New York?
Yeah, I grew up outside of New York. Yeah.
Okay. So obviously it's very similar to LA where it's very challenging to meet people, especially in the time that allotted that we have in our very busy schedules. Did you find from your own personal experiences that you were like, this is insane, like something needs to give, that the dating world isn't progressing and moving into a new format to help all of us out, where you were like, it's time that there was a new, the 2.0 of the dating world?
Yeah, I think people are just really dependent on dating apps, which again, I'm not going to give my opinion one way or another because that's just where our behavior is going. However, I think the reliance of just swiping and then getting that validation and then all the downside around swiping and again, the dopamine rush, that's why a lot of people have now dropped Facebook, is because Facebook became really popular because around notifications and friend requests, they're all dopamine hits. So again, I saw the opportunity of how do we bring back traditional dating, but leverage technology to do so. So I think that blend of old fashioned, our parents dating, picking up the phone is really cool to me because it really facilitates authentic connection. But how do we do so in a way that it doesn't require hours of your time to see if it's a fit or not?
Right. And it's officially launched in New York, just not.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
it's officially launched in New York. We're pushing out a pretty major update in the next few months. And then the goal would be to expand to the West Coast.
So literally, just so people know, once it rolls out and more people can get it, you log in and it asks you some preferences and you kind of say is it what your type is and what
gender, interest, age preference. You could either sign up through your Facebook or phone number. So we keep the preferences actually pretty limited for the reason of you may be surprised who the person is. So at first it was actually pretty interesting. I think using data is really important to make any decisions for any type of company you're working on. So when we launched, and we would allow you to see the actual person before the video date started, sometimes people would cancel the match. And they started treating it as Tinder again, basing off the profile photo. Once we blurred the photo, the cancellation stopped because people were like, I'm excited to see what happens. And then some of those people actually thumbs up them after the 60 seconds, which allows them to then go into a match. And then you could do video, message, video call, we're adding texting. So that was pretty interesting. So we're trying to be that happy medium of we don't want you to not know anything about the person where it's totally blind and totally cold. But on the other hand, we don't want it to be a typical swiping app where it's just only based off their photo. I think we lean more so less on the photo and more about who the person is.
So would you say that, I think there's a lot of different parts that you can dissect on it in terms of, you could potentially say that you and your company are trying to change human behavior that we've almost regressed into, where we're I just need the facts, and okay, you don't hit my statistics that I need next. Whereas this is actually confronting us with that and actually make it slightly uncomfortable, where you're no, I need all my filters of does this person have bluish green eyes? And you're no. Yeah. Pull back from that and start changing the human behavior back to being a little bit more open-minded.
Yeah, I think it's a pendulum, right? We were originally, before technology, it was just meeting through a friend, serendipity, just stop at a bar, wherever, coffee shop. And that was when you think of that spectrum of definitely being vulnerable and putting yourself out there. Now with apps, it's the least vulnerable, least risky. So now we're on this side. I think with Filter Off, I'm trying to swing the pendulum back in the middle and basically bring, again, the authentic relationship and still being vulnerable by going on video. Because a lot of our users have said it literally feels like the first date before going on the traditional first date. They get the first date they get nervous. They have the anxiety of who is this person going to be? And that's important to us. We want it to actually feel like an actual date.
Okay. I think video, yeah, it's interesting what just the dynamic of the video does with people too, as far as, how it makes them feel, as opposed to going to a coffee shop, and what that does to the human connection of it. And yeah, I find that very interesting.
Plus, things can get lost in translation,
Yeah.
when you're just doing back and forth of texting and all of that, obviously, and when personally, I think the nonverbal communication is the most important thing that is lacking when it comes to any social media or dating app or anything like that, where you're like, I can't see the nonverbal cues that you're giving. Do you know what I mean? And with video, it's hard to hide those things, I
think people are also getting sick of traditional dating apps because, like you said before, is with texting or being on social, like you can say anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're really not that, it's not that being that uncomfortable, but on video, you're much more yourself. You're not going to be like, hey, send me a nude, which unfortunately that happens. People do that all the time. And that's why like women are like disgusted with like Tinder. And they call it like a hookup app now. So I think again, it's like bringing back more traditional dating and also just being yourself, because adding that layer of video is going to, I think, get closer to who you actually are versus being behind the filter with even texting.
I think it's really interesting trying to find the true connection again, because it's almost like, yes, we're all connected, but we're not. We're so we're so like completely alone in our own little bubble. But now this is like stripping away those layers a little bit and saying, hey, let's come back to being a human, and interaction and that type of thing. I think it's great.
I think it's great. I think you're bringing more, there's more responsibility with the video. You're taking it back in the direction of traditional.
And accountability, like to your point, I actually just posted on my Instagram story yesterday, a friend of mine who was like, help Kira, what do I do? This is how men talk to me. And it was through a dating app, and he was very open with wanting to hook up right away, and they hadn't met yet. And she's like, well, I usually like want to know if the person that, has had STD testing and all that. He's like completely out of his mind that she would ask a question like, hey, do you mind getting STD testing? It's just as like, and he just like raking over the coals over it. Whereas like you're held accountable when it's face to face. You're not going to say certain things in front of someone face to face like you would where you're like, text done, I don't feel accountable,
100%.
So totally. And so when you do that, there's like the 7 p.m. live and thing and such, and then eventually people can meet up in person. But you mentioned a few minutes ago, just to wrap it up, there are more things coming, but you can't exactly talk about exactly what you're going to be doing beyond as you continue to develop the app, correct? Is that
Yeah, to be very honest, like dating apps steal from us all the time. So I'd rather just launch it.
I think you should keep us on edge. And then once you do develop it, we can have you on again and hear more.
Yeah. I'm really excited.
VR, I'm going to lose my brain now. Like, we're all in a VR space. And it's
I'll just tell you this. It's not crazy VR, but it's definitely more traditional dating with using the video component as our bread and butter, but like the process is completely different. And I learned about this because I think as any person who runs a company, right? Like the most important thing is like what your users want, how they behave on the system. So just speaking to users all the time and me actually using the app, I started realizing what was deficient. And then being able to create a new type of process that I think will really be amazing in terms of leveraging technology, but again, keeping like the human element in mind.
Amazing.
Really exciting.
Love it. So also moving away from that, you're also doing some other things, especially within mental health. And I'm not quite as familiar with everything you're doing in that realm, but I want to hear about it. I did look at it with 18%, I believe it said it was. Can you tell us a little bit more about where your focus is outside of the dating app and what you're doing in mental health and how it all ties together?
Yeah. So 18% is a peer-to-peer support online community that's hosted on Slack. 18% to date. We have over 5,000 members, over 700,000 messages sent on the platform. We're partners with the crisis text line, as well as the New York City government. And a number of Fortune 50 companies actually have employees that are on that. So it's an anonymous platform to just basically ask for support. And I started after my friend had passed away, wanted to do something to help people who have mental health issues. And I think it really, I think my passion really stems from is again, human connection, right? And again, it goes back to a typical traditional dating app of swiping, addiction. I just want to create technology that is authentic, that brings about again, the human experience, connection, and does good things for people. So I think that's how they both relate. But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with the mental health community.
Humanity and connection and making the world a better place through humans, right?
Yeah.
Sounds like that's...
When I ask if someone's in crisis, statistically, and I don't know this for a fact, but I have to, from what I've researched, statistically, most people don't want to pick up the phone and talk to someone, whereas texting feels a little bit better, where it's anonymous. You can't hear me crying over text. You know what I mean? It feels a little safer to talk in that regard than to talk to a real person.
Yeah, and that's how the crisis text line really took off. It's text first if you're in crisis, and you can see 18% as text first as well, but it's for people that are not in crisis but may just be going through something. So what's really amazing is the crisis text line. We're official partners. And when people that are actually not high risk will reach out to the crisis text line, they refer them to 18% to get support, because the crisis text line, their goal is to help people that are actually in crisis.
Right.
And if you're texting every day, you can hold up a slot essentially for someone who is in crisis. So how do they serve people in crisis more quickly and efficiently? So that's where the partnership. And we're partnered with about 13 other hotlines around the country. So it's just a win-win for both entities.
Wow.
That's incredible.
I love it. And so are there any other projects you're working on and doing that you want to talk about, that you could tell us about, that connects to both 18% and filter off? Or are there anything else you're working on developing?
I mean, there's other aspects of 18%. For example, what's really cool is every Friday we ask, what did you achieve today or achieve this week, big or small? And you'll see 50 people just say I got a job, or I even got out of bed, or I saw my therapist, really intense stuff. And what I realize is when you're able to share your accomplishments, especially to a community, that really helps with your own healing. Because sometimes it's really hard to acknowledge what you've achieved. And I think it goes back down to what you're actually grateful for. And that really helps with just your overall well-being. So that's a really cool component. And then we also offer an online therapy. So we partnered with a company, Rethink My Therapy, and the company that offers the therapy is called MD Live. So for the first month, for $1 a month, you get unlimited therapy through the phone or through video, and then after that, $60 a month. So again, it's how do we provide affordable healthcare to individuals and in the comfort of their own home? Because a lot of people that have severe depression, let's say, may not even be able to leave their bed. So this is a really cool offering that we're really excited about, that we launched about a month ago. And it goes into the mission of 18% of just community, but also helping people throughout the world. So, yeah.
And I think that what you're doing with mental health too is so important. You mentioned healthcare. I think that technology is the route towards much lower cost healthcare and maybe eventually free healthcare for a lot of people. And we don't quite focus on the technology in that realm as much as I think we should. And I feel like the tools are there now. We're getting the tools now through things like you're doing. We just haven't really organized them yet. People who need help in whatever can go to an app or can go to a forum, whether they're injured and can sign in an app, or if they have mental health and can find a crowd to talk to. I feel like things are there. but people like you are helping us see that it's there so people can get the help they need quicker. Like technology is pushing that forward, right?
Yeah, and what's cool about the space is there's a lot of players out there, but they all have different like offerings and how they administer it, right? So like we were talking about like texting for like therapy, and then like with the dating app, it's video first. So how things are administered is also really interesting, and getting back down to like what would provide most value. And then what I also think about is like what would provide most value, but also just in terms of like what are the pain points that we could also address. So like how do you administer, whether it's this new dating app or whether it's online therapy or peer-to-peer support, I think is like a really interesting approach as well that more and more people are looking at. So how does technology enable these offerings is something that's like really fascinating to me.
Plus, I think everyone's very different. You know, some people are visual, some people,
100%.
you know, it's to your point earlier, you know, it's knowing your users and what they want. So we have our, you know, our own ideas of like, well, I don't like to talk on the phone, but I like to text, but that may not be what the users want. They may want something different, you know? So it's like knowing what that audience is and building it around it. Because there's so many different levels of how people want to communicate.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Really great stuff. Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you so much for joining us, and good luck with everything that's you're working on. I don't know how you get any sleep. You have a lot going on. Do you have partners with all the companies or that you're kind of working with, or you kind of run the ship and then you have your team?
So I have a part for 18%. My partner is David Markovich. He runs the largest online marketing Slack community, Online Geniuses. So that's how we took the same idea and then applied it to mental health. And then for Filter Off, I have a team as well. Yeah.
And then you have a website, which is Zach. I want to make sure I pronounce your last name right. It's Schleien?
Yeah, Schleien. Yep, Zach Schleien. So yeah, I'm redoing my website right now, just trying to better portray who I am as a person, what I do. So so just
that's great.
So Zach Schleien, people can contact you through your website, which is zachschleien.com. We will put all that in the information. I'm also going to turn this into a Thrive Global written blog in the community section. They're excited about that at Thrive. You have this amazing dating app Filter Off, which is in New York now. It's going to be going bigger very soon.
Make LA the next one.
Yeah.
You have a choice.
The goal is LA next.
As well as 18% your online form for mental health. So Zach Schleien, dating app, mental health advocate, entrepreneur, everything you're doing is amazing. We thank you for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, and good luck with everything.
I appreciate it. And thank you for both of you for having me. And like especially with like mental health, really important to just share the message because it could actually save life.
All of its awareness. Yeah, we just got off of Men's Health Month last month, so it's like good to really push that ahead for sure. So
thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Okay.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day. All right.
Bye.